I used to be a park ranger for Yellowstone National Park. I was walking along the small boardwalk when I came to an overlook where I could see a herd of buffalo grazing in the distance, and some of them had wandered off into the trees where it was more difficult to see. As I was watching, one jumped out from behind a tree and ran away, back into the forest. I noticed right then that they were being hunted by something. Out of the woodline, I saw this large canine-type animal, except it wasn't a canine. At least, not your typical canine. It was walking on its hind legs, just like a person, but it was holding onto the tree, using its momentum to propel itself towards the bison that had just went into the tree. As I watched, in my mind, I was like, that's not real. That did not just happen. In less than 10 seconds, it had killed the bison, dragging its carcass off behind a large boulder further into the woodline. As soon as the body was out of sight, a group of these wolves moved out from where they were hiding inside the trees, began moving towards the carcass. There must have been at least 10 of them, but they were more than popping out from behind the trees and bushes where they had been hiding. These were wolves like I had never seen before. I'd never heard in my life of wolves that were able to stand on their hind legs. Not like these. This was something else entirely. I don't know how many of these types of creatures were in the park, nor do I know where they originated from. No animal have I ever seen looks like these creatures do. They quickly begin grouping back into formation, moving towards the other bison. I got scared and began making my way back to headquarters very quickly. The last thing I saw was them surrounding the remaining bison, killing them. I will never forget what I saw that day in Yellowstone, nor do I want to ever see it again. This was back in 1989. Now that the information is much more available to all of us online, I've learned that these creatures that I've seen are actually referred to as dogmen. They've been documented in all different parts of the world for centuries. These things are apparently nocturnal, using whatever shadows are available to be able to sneak up on their prey just before attacking. There's a lot more information out there too, but I'm afraid that it just might get me killed if people knew that I knew about these things. What's shocking is these things were hunting in the evening, not dark at all. And the angle I was watching them at, they were completely visible from where I was. Before you go off and start asking questions, please know that I have not seen the dogmen since 1989. As far as I know, they are not in Yellowstone anymore. At least I hope not. I'm not afraid to admit that these things exist. I have seen them with my own two eyes. Unless someone can explain what it is that I saw all those years ago, I'm not the only one. I chose to share this because it is real. People need to be aware what's out there. If you choose not to believe me, then fine. But please, do your research before making a decision on it. It's very important that we understand these things a lot better than I do. I used to be a search and rescue officer, also working as a ranger. I've seen some very disturbing things out here in these parks, but never anything like this. It's been exactly 10 years since the following events occurred. This summer that I ran into what I've dubbed a dogman. I was working in a very well-known park. I won't say which. At the time, I'd been in the service for 3 years, and this was my first real summer out on my own by myself. It was pretty intimidating, but I loved it. The first night that I had any contact with what would become known as the dogman to me and my crew. We had just finished up our search for the day, and were heading back to camp. I was at the front of the line walking, when I saw something out of the corner of my eye on one of those long boulder fields that are scattered all throughout. I immediately stopped and began looking around, trying to see what it was that I had seen, but there was nothing. Just trees and bushes all around. I thought, man, I'm tired, but that looked like a wolf. I might have had some kind of spooked expression because one of my other guys asked me what was wrong. I told him what I saw. He told me he saw it too. I thought you were going to yell at us or something for stopping. We all continued on towards camp when one of the guys who was walking behind me told me to look up ahead of you. I look up and see a very large wolf standing in front of us, roughly 60 yards away. You have to understand, these weren't just wolves. These were extremely oversized, very large, and standing upright. We decided to move out away from view of this thing, and immediately, we noticed we were actually surrounded by several of them, hiding up in the trees all around us, and we never knew it the entire time. Completely panicked by being surrounded by these large unknown wolf creatures, we fled back the way we came while having our weapons drawn. It was dark, and it did not help that we were running through the thorn bushes and rocks as quickly as we can go. We took cover behind a large rock outcropping, where we waited until our supervisor showed up, along with 2 other fellow rangers. We told them what had happened. We didn't know how to make of it or what to make of it, but I didn't care what they called it, and I still don't, because I know what I saw. That night was just a warm-up for the following night. That's when we really got our first up-close and personal look at these creatures. During the search for a lost hunter, we made a pretty good plan on how to handle the search. I was the point for our team, which consisted of 2 rangers and 3 law enforcement. We were searching a drainage that I knew to be a very dangerous and dark spot because of a lot of loose rocks, steep hillsides, and thick underbrush. This is where the hunter was last spotted. Quick note, he was not hunting at this point in time. He's referred to as a hunter because he's very well known in the area. My ranger partner, who was roughly 30 feet behind me, had stopped and told me to wait up. I proceeded slowly until I was even with him, and he made me stop so he could show me something. He pointed down into the drainage and said, "Do you see that? What is that?" I looked at what he was pointing at, but I couldn't see anything of significance. Instead, my partner insisted there was something there. Looking at it from this angle, I realized there was an unnatural shape to the bush down in the drainage. I had my M16 with me, and immediately handed it off to my partner, who stayed back as I slowly made my way down towards whatever was down there. I got within 5 feet of the object, which turned out to be a downed log. I heard the most terrifying growl right behind me. My heart jumped into my throat, and I immediately turned around to face whatever it was that made the sound. Immediately, in front of me, were 2 of these creatures. All I can see in the dark at first was their eyes. They had reflective red eyes, which is what really gave me the impression that they were these wolf things at first. They got up so close to me, I could see their teeth and hear them breathing heavily with the growls coming from their throats. One of them actually stuck their arm out to grab me, but I was able to be pulled up just in time by my fellow ranger who had heard the growling and began coming down to find out what was going on. We decided not to fire at these things. We didn't know exactly what we were dealing with here. I didn't know how much of this I could take. It was now getting really real for me, but I kept my composure enough to tell my partner to call in backup. We were able to get back up onto the high rock bluff, where we were able to get a signal on our radios. We relayed the message to my supervisor. There was something out there, and we needed backup immediately. He ordered us to remain as quiet as possible until they could respond, which I thought would be never at this point. But it wasn't long when we heard them coming in right behind us. The ground shook, and we could smell the wolves in front of us. But they didn't move until a bright spotlight shined on them down in the drainage. The front wolf, or whatever you want to call it, stood still for a moment, as if it was wondering what this light was before getting up and turning back toward us and leaving us in the dark once more. Both of them ran off into the night, which we did not pursue. We knew there was a search team coming up behind us, so we waited for them in hopes that they would be better armed with something more than what we had, before going back down into that pit of hell. During this time, I noticed that the wolves were nothing like any dogs or coyotes I have ever seen. They were gigantic, taller than a Great Dane, and much wider. Their legs were straight up, wide apart, allowing them to easily put their front paws on a human's chest, ripping it open if they wanted to. When they ran, they were kind of hunched over, with their back end raised high in the air. I also noticed they did not have any real teeth, except for many sharp tiny teeth and long canine fangs extending past their lips when their mouths were open. After this night, that would be the last we would encounter of these bizarre creatures. I'm not sure what they were or where they came from, but I have no explanation for them. There were over 20 sightings just like this one recorded way back in the 70s, while many of us still work there. Not me though, and many more since. At one point, they were referred to as wolves of death because there seemed to be a sort of pattern to how they killed. We would find many large bison and other large game animals killed in disturbing ways. Not killed and eaten like traditional predators do. Torn to ribbons and mutilated. It's like whatever was killing these animals was killing just for the sake of it. Moral of the story is, whatever these creatures were or are, they are extremely dangerous and should not be approached by any means. There's no telling what they would have done to me had I not had my team with me, or had I been caught down there with less equipment than I had. Just know whatever you see out in parks is not natural and should be avoided at all costs. The ranger who was with me that night had a pretty good run as far as rangers do, but from what I've heard, he retired around the same time this thing happened. He just kind of fell off the face of the earth, so to speak, which we all found strange. I'm not sure if there was any follow-up done by our park management after these sightings, but I didn't hear anything about it happening again, at least on paper.